Hello, everyone. If you're joining us, welcome. We'll give it a moment or two before we start, just to let people arrive. I can see the participants coming up on the little list. That's brilliant. Hi, welcome if you just joined us. We're just about to start in 30 seconds. Just waiting for a few more people to join us. Right, well, let's start. I'm sure people can join us in due course. So welcome to the travel forecast number 2. It's usually hosted by my colleague Matt, but I've stepped in today because Matt is happily for us in the Maldives at the moment, which is very exciting for all of us in travel, and it's given us a real boost in the office actually. He's probably online now, but he's got a bit spotty internet where he is, so you've got me to host. I'm Sam Clark. I'm the co-founder and managing director of Experience Travel Group. We've got some great guests today, so just want to welcome them. One from California, one from the Mull of Kintyre, and one from Honor Oak in southeast London. So first of all, we've got Heather McKinlay. She's the co-founder of McKinlay Kidd, who organised one of our very best ever family holidays in the Orkney Islands. And being an Asian specialist, it often surprises people when I say one of our best holidays within the Orkney Islands, but it was an absolutely awesome holiday. Heather's also a mad keen Charlton fan and a really good football writer. So I'd be interested to ask her opinions on the sad demise of Maradona, but that's for another time. Secondly, we've got Sam Highley, who's the MD and founder of All Roads North, who do luxury road trips in North America. I think of all the travel companies that I've come across in my time, probably that's the one that got me most excited about doing a trip with them. I would absolutely love to do a trip with them one day. Last but not least, we've got our very own Melissa Nicholas, who's co-founder along with Tom and myself of Experience Travel Group. Wanted to welcome all of you who've joined us. I see on our list there's many friends of ETG come back here from the first travel forecast. Many of you booked with us many times before, so welcome again. Welcome also to our new friends from across the pond. I see on our list we've got clients from Israel. I think that's Michelle, hi. Luxembourg, France and Germany. So we're all friends today in this post-Trump, pre-Brexit world. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. We'll divide this into 3 sections and I'll ask some questions of our panelists. If you've got a question at any time, please ask it on the Q&A that you'll see in front of you. If you see someone else give a question that you want an answer to, give it a thumbs up and that will just make it that bit more likely we'll be able to get to it. We won't get to all the questions today, but I will try and get a couple in at the end. Any questions we don't manage to answer, we will answer later on our blog if we can, if we know the answers. We'll also be doing a couple of polls during the event. So, welcome to my panel. And let's start. If you can just start with who you are, what your company does, and what's the state of travel in your destination right now, and where are you at as a company? So if we start with Heather.
Thanks very much, Sam. I won't go on about Charlton too much tonight, I promise. Our company is McKinlay Kidd. So it was started by myself and my husband, Robert Kidd, back in 2003. And we focus very much, when we started the company, it was very much about tailor-made getaways for the domestic audience. And initially, it was really about targeting people in England who wanted to have a lovely holiday in Scotland. And that was where, that was how we started building the business. And then over the years, we've expanded to introduce the whole of the rest of the UK and Ireland. And we do everything through personal research. So we won't send people anywhere that we haven't been and loved ourselves. again, over the years, we've expanded to welcome customers from across the world, and particularly from the States, Canada, Australia. But satisfying a UK customers has always been absolutely core to what we do, because we feel if we can give people a brilliant holiday in their own country, then that's the real proof of our authenticity. And delighted that you gave us such a good feedback from your trip to Orkney. State of the business at the moment. Well, this year we were luckier than many travel companies in the UK in that we did have travel taking place from mid-July through till around mid-October. So that enabled us to get some people away, albeit not as many as we planned for and we would have hoped to have done. And on the whole, people had brilliant trips. Robert and myself managed to get away to Northern Ireland, and that's a real hidden gem, I think, of the British Isles with the Causeway Coast and Strangford Lough. We had customers travelling really from the Scilly Isles right through to Shetland in the far north. And obviously we had to be quite agile and sort of act on our feet as lockdowns happened and regulations changed. We had to effectively evacuate some customers who were travelling around Wales as a new lockdown came in and move them to the Cotswolds for their last few nights. But we've had people doing all sorts of things. We've had people doing self-drive tours of Scotland's north coast, people taking ferries over to islands, whether that was in the south of England or up off the west of Scotland. We've had a few people touring by rail, including taking trips on the Jacobite Express steam train. And we've even had a few clients on flights, which is, I know, quite unusual for most. Here, it's very much talking about small planes and fairly short hops. Such as hop over to the Isle of Barra, where the plane actually lands on the sand. So that's a brilliant experience. Between Westrain, Papa Westrain and Orkney, which is the shortest scheduled flight in the world. So, we've done our best to basically get people away. We've had some really determined customers who said they were going to travel come hell or high water. We had a young couple who were due to go on honeymoon to the Maldives and they switched and went to the Scottish Highlands instead. But basically we've just done all we can to make sure that we've got people away and that they've had a brilliant time.
Awesome. Thanks, Heather. I think I've done that shortest flight on your trip. That was fantastic. So same question for you, Sam. How's it going over there in the US?
Hi, Sam, and thanks for having me part of this conversation. It's great to be able to talk to everybody. So I'm sure as soon as I open my mouth, everyone has guessed I'm not actually from the US. I'm firmly a Brit as well. So, but based here in Venice in LA. So as transatlantic as it gets. We design luxury road trips throughout the US, and I founded it in 2014, having myself been sort of very much surprised by what I found in the US. I sort of came here initially 10, 11 years ago with a lot of preconceptions as to what the US had to offer as a travel destination, most of them sort of based on bad Hollywood movies and a lot of them negative, and started to travel, and sure enough was blown away by what a sort of diverse country the US is, and didn't see anybody doing the great style of travel that you guys do in Asia or Heather does in the UK, really looking at the US as a kind of challenging place to travel where you can have these meaningful experiences, and no one was really offering that. So that was where All Roads North sort of came in to hopefully fill that gap. In terms of where we are and what we've seen over the last few months, we've actually been incredibly lucky. So we have 50% of our clients going into COVID were from the US anyway. We had 3 months of full lockdown, which was fairly miserable for everybody, as I'm sure everybody around the world did. And then sort of towards the end of May, we went from kind of 0 to 100 with a lot of US clients looking to really just get away from home. They'd been locked up for 2 or 3 months. And the sort of style of travel and the fact that everything we do is self-drive, it's all private, it's highly customized, I think was well suited to what people were looking for. So we've really had a pretty busy summer, albeit a different one in that travel's being done on a very last minute basis. We've had no commercial flights really. So almost all of our clients have been, driving from home or flying privately. And in terms of sort of the geography of the US, really looking to get out into sort of less populated areas, getting back to nature. The national parks have been hugely popular. So I read yesterday that Yellowstone had record visitation numbers in August, which is really quite phenomenal, considering what was happening at the beginning of the year. So Montana, Wyoming have probably been our most popular destination, Utah, Colorado, people looking at private homes, private tented camps, different styles of accommodation that can sort of facilitate social distancing. And we've had some, great feedback. I think there's been, travel is happening differently at the moment. So there are things that clients will notice. Dining has probably been, one of the things that's been heavily impacted. And hotels are operating in a different way, but certainly been a lot of people sort of getting out and enjoying the US, which has been great. There's been this sort of renaissance in kind of domestic travel, which has been fantastic. From an international standpoint, obviously, there's no sort of EU arrivals coming into the US, but with the sort of vaccine news, and there is certainly light at the end of the tunnel, we're hopeful that that's going to look very different as we kind of move into next year.
Okay, good. Thanks for that, Sam. Okay, Melissa, what's the update?
Do you want me to say a bit about Experience Travel Group as well, or? You
probably better, yeah.
So for those who don't know, we're an Asia specialist. Like the others, all our trips are based around personal research, and every trip is designed, tailor-made and designed from scratch. And we like to think we arrange holidays that reveal the fabric of a destination and that really make travel count. So that's kind of us in a nutshell. And I think we've had a very different year because the majority of our countries, although much has been said about them being on the travel corridor list, is most of them have been closed for most of the year. So we've not really been able to send anyone anywhere really since March. But we've started to feel some steps in the right direction. The Maldives, being, as Sam already mentioned, has been open actually since July, but was put on the green travel corridor list about a month ago, which was fantastic news for us because beyond everything else, it's a perfect destination at the moment because it's naturally completely socially distanced. It's a great time of year to go there. And we've already started to see quite a few people starting to book trips to go there. And as Sam mentioned, Matt, our colleague, is there at the moment and is probably on this call somewhere. And if anybody's interested in going, he's written a terrific blog which sort of describes quite a few of the practicalities around travel, about flying, and actually what it's like being there at the moment. So we've got the Maldives, which is great. And beyond that, we've got a few bits of news that I've heard over the last few days, that both Oman and Indonesia are talking about the possibility that they're going to be opening very, very soon. Oman in particular is really exciting because it's a destination we only launched at the beginning of this year. So we've not really had the opportunity to arrange that many trips there yet. So it's exciting for me personally. Because I've been there myself and it's just an amazing destination. And also it's really good because it's the perfect time of year to go there as well. So the weather's great all through the winter. Again, very socially distant. It's got fantastic kind of vast open spaces and beautiful scenery. So that's really good as well. Indonesia is also very exciting because Indonesia is obviously huge, 17,000 islands. There's like 101 things even in Bali that are kind of amazing things that you can do. Slight difference with Indonesia is it's not weather-wise the perfect time of year to go. So I think Oman in particular is the really exciting one at the moment, and obviously the Maldives, as I mentioned.
Fantastic, thanks, Melissa. Now we're just going to have a very quick poll just to get you all warmed up. So let's just pop that out there. I can see a couple of questions in there, so thanks for that. Do put any more questions that you've got on there. So you should. I'm not seeing seeing the votes coming in now. That's very good. So, get me out of here ASAP. He's doing all right early on. So that's good for us travel people. Ideally go abroad within the next 6 months. Looks like it's somewhat of the favourite. We're getting towards everyone's voting now. Just give it a couple more seconds, and then I will stop. So there we go. 21% say get me out of here ASAP. 48% ideally go abroad within the next 6 months. 21% domestic only for the time being, and 19% not for a widespread vaccine. So fair enough. Let's move on to the next question. So now's the time to get out your crystal ball, people. How are things looking for your destinations a little further out? What do you think are the challenges to travel, and what should customers be thinking about? So Melissa, let's start with you.
Yeah, so there's obviously, I could talk all day about this, really. I feel like kind of Mystic Meg with a crystal ball at the moment, trying to think what's going to happen. But the main challenge for us is obviously being the fact that our countries are actually closed. But they've, on the flip side of that, they've all actually, from a COVID point of view, they're all quite safe. They've by being closed, they've sort of kept, most countries have kept it quite well under control, and within them, life is kind of, most countries, life is kind of has resumed to normal, more so than it has for us. And Tom, our co-founder, has been living in Thailand all throughout the year, and he's already out there doing things that we're all a bit jealous of him. He's going off to islands and things like that we'd all love to be doing. So really, I think the big game changer is obviously going to be the vaccine. I think as there's sort of progress with that, we'll start to see more places opening up. The other challenge is obviously at the moment you're having to have a PCR test before you go to any destinations that open. We've sort of, off the back of that, we've sort of done a lot of research into good companies to get them with, and we're actually including the test as part of the holiday. So we're sort of taking that out of the equation for people, hopefully a little bit. Travel itself, we're trying to think of in two separate ways. So one is, where can you travel now? And one, what is it good to actually think about booking now? So in terms of where you can travel now, I would say certainly for the next month or two, into perhaps into February. In terms of our destinations, the Maldives and Oman, hopefully, I'm talking about Oman, it's not 100% yet, but those are going to be the two really good destinations to go to, because they're hopefully both going to be open, and the weather's really good as well. Possibly towards the February time, maybe January, we don't really know, but there might be some movement with Thailand, Sri Lanka and Vietnam, possibly in quite a limited way. And beyond that, Cambodia and Laos tend to follow, just because of the flight connections and that sort of thing, what Thailand and Vietnam do. Then into the summer, I think Indonesia's a fantastic weather in the summer. Sri Lanka and Borneo are all really good in the summer, so we'd hope there'd be some movement around those. And then obviously, as we look towards the autumn and winter next year, then we hope there'll be a vaccine, the vaccines will be rolled out, and hopefully everything will be getting much more back to normal. So so that's sort of thinking about where to travel throughout the year. In terms of booking, I'm obviously very biased here, but I actually think that there's probably never been a better time to book trips, certainly for sort of further ahead for this time next year. And the reason I think that is, we're offering great deal of flexibility, small deposits, and obviously the availability is good, so it's a good time to really get in there, and get your trips planned, have something amazing to look forward to, and have some sort of and knowing that there's flexibility around that. So I think that's really good. And then as for where to book ahead, there are certain destinations for us that you really have to book ahead. Bhutan is a big one that you have to really plan that way in advance. Also, there's certain aspects in Borneo that do need to be thought about quite far in advance. Christmas 2021, I can imagine that with this huge pent up demand, that everyone around the world has missed a whole year of going on holiday. So I think sort of for the latter end of next year, things are going to get booked up very, very quickly. So I actually think it's going to be a very good time to book while there's still the flexibility there.
Good, excellent. Okay, just one quick question there, Melissa. By limited openings, what did you mean by that for Thailand?
So I meant that in the sense that we think they might start off by testing particular areas. Certainly with Vietnam, I've heard that they might open up Phu Quoc Island, which is an island off the south coast of Vietnam, and just have, let tourists go there to start off with, just to see how it goes. So it's that kind of thing that I'm thinking might happen in the next couple of months.
Okay.
But these things tend to be announced very quickly and come quite suddenly. So could be more than that.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Sam, same question for you.
Yeah, this is the difficult question that I wasn't looking forward to, Sam. So I think the first step for the US, and I'll focus on kind of international travelers coming into the US. Although I think the relevant thing to say is, because domestic travel has been sort of happening to quite a large degree this year, and certainly we expect it to be next year as well, is in terms of infrastructure, so properties, guides, a lot of people have actually been sort of up and running, and that's sort of, I think, ready and waiting for when borders do open. And in terms of their protocols and how they've been doing things differently, they've had a whole year pretty much at that point to iron out a lot of the kind of kinks. So I think that's a positive from what we've seen on the domestic side for how that'll sort of relay once international travel's back up and running. Obviously, it's a two-way, takes two to tango with an international border. And we're going to have to see sort of FCO advice change coming into the US, and then also the US to lift what's currently effectively a ban of EU travelers coming into the country. My hope is that now we have, or will have, touch wood, somebody different in the White House, that we might have a sort of slightly more sort of global, outward-looking view on that. And I think that's going to kind of help, or at least make things a little bit more predictable. I think, as most of the audience will kind of know, the US operates very differently in terms of the federal system. So the power that each state has to regulate things, particularly travel, makes it a slightly more complicated picture than a country that it's done at a national level, and that's all that we need to worry about. And that's what we've seen this year. So there is a patchwork quilt at the moment of varying travel restrictions by state. So, for example, Vermont, they have a 14-day quarantine blanket pretty much for all arrivals. The majority of states have no restrictions at all. And then there's some that sort of sit in between that say, we'll waive a quarantine if you take a sort of PCR COVID test before you come. So I think we're just going to need to see, those state level restrictions somehow come into alignment with what's happening at a national level, so that somebody getting on a plane in the UK, they're going to have some sort of level of consistency depending on whether they're going to New York or California. I've heard some really promising things in terms of what the airlines are doing in terms of getting testing protocols up and running, so that they're ready, to manage travel internationally. I know they're running some big trials on that sort of main transatlantic route at the moment, which is promising. So if I was putting my money on the table as to when we'd see, I think that hopefully, people listening are going to feel comfortable sort of booking a trip to the US springtime for summer travel. I think, understandably, I think booking something now for say spring, I understand that's going to be difficult. There's a lot of unknowns still, but I'm hoping that sort of spring period for summer travel. Obviously, if we've got any sort of US sort of members on the call, I think, we're going to hopefully see some, I think next year is going to be hugely busy. Sort of echoing a little bit what Melissa was saying, availability, we're already seeing it be very tight for next year. So I think it's been a sort of, the cities have been hard hit, but if you're a ranch in Montana, they've actually never been busier. So I think that does mean sort of booking early is going to be important. And we're just doubling down on what we do well. So getting clients off the beaten path, focusing on Northern California rather than Big Sur, potentially, maybe moving away from the national parks of Utah and getting people into the National Monument, Grand Staircase, Escalante. So all things that we've been doing already that we'll probably double down on next year. accommodation wise, we've really ramped up our sort of portfolio of private homes. We've put a partnership in place with a group called Exclusive Resorts, again, a vetted network of private residences, and working with a group called Explore Ranches, which giving clients access to private ranch properties throughout the US. We've done a full audit really of all of our experiences. Again, everything's done on a private basis, so it's pretty well suited to travel at the moment anyway, but really making sure we've assessed all of the touch points that a client's going to come into contact with. Are you going to be sharing a vehicle with a guide, changing things around so you might meet them at a trailhead if you're in a national park, not getting a fishing license in a fishing outfitters in their physical presence, doing that all online in advance so we can kind of minimize those touch points. I mentioned dining has been a big sort of area that's happening differently. So a lot of restaurants in the US, it's outdoor dining only, or they may well be closed. So we've sort of, again, vetted the sort of restaurant suggestions that we're making on that front. A lot of private dining, getting chefs into private homes or even into sort of hotel accommodations, and then really making sure that you know what to expect. So I think what we found from this year is just we can't communicate enough to say, this is the experience that you're going to have. You're going to go rafting, you'll be in a private raft. Here's how you're going to get to the river. So there's not that sort of element of surprise once you're on the ground, in terms of who you might be interacting with. What's the sort of mask requirements? Obviously, masks are required in most areas of the US. Whether that's being complied with is slightly different. So just making sure clients know what to expect is a big thing for us. Yeah,
there's a lot of communication needed, isn't there, both ways? We need to know what people are comfortable with, and we need to speak to our suppliers in return. So yeah, good. Okay, that's really interesting, and interesting about the difference between the federal and state level. Now, over to you, Heather. A bit of a hot potato, but obviously you're going to be dealing with international borders for the first time ever in January. How are you going to deal with that and COVID, and how can we reassure people that if they do want to travel but they either can't or are unwilling to go abroad and based in the UK, what options are there for them?
A couple of things on that. I mean, I think first of all, I'd pick up that it's not either or in terms of having a holiday abroad and having a holiday in the UK as restrictions lift. And historically, something like 75-80% of people would take a holiday in the UK, often as well as one abroad, of the UK population. Now, often that was maybe short breaks rather than a main holiday, and we have seen more people now considering a main holiday. When it comes to borders, we've got two B words to contend with next year, I think, haven't we? Brexit and borders. I think we feel that the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, that should not become an issue. There is something called the Common Travel Area, which is long established even before the EU existed, which protects free movement between people from GB and into Ireland. So actually, when things lift up, I mean, Ireland has been off limits this year, sadly, the Republic. But as things open up, we hope it will actually be a very easy way for people from the British mainland to get a bit of a European experience, regardless of what else may happen around Brexit. So I think the Irish tourism industry is desperate to really welcome people back as soon as they can safely. It's been very tough for them. In the rest of the UK and the kind of areas that we offer, I think what we have seen is that when things started to open up, there was a little bit of concern among local communities, particularly in the remoter areas, that suddenly there'll be this influx of visitors, and that might bring COVID with them, and that there was a little bit of, well, quite a lot of concern about that. What actually happened, in fact, was that once people started arriving and people got used to it and it became the norm again, a lot of those concerns went away. And I think it's very noticeable now that the Highlands of Scotland, the Islands of Scotland, southwest of England still have some of the lowest COVID rates, and they have not been affected despite having an influx of visitors from elsewhere. So I think that's helped to really reassure people that tourist visitors don't necessarily cause a higher risk. I think in terms of the actual opportunity, there are fantastic experiences that you can do throughout the UK. I've touched on a few of them already, but the Outer Hebrides has beaches to rival the Caribbean on a sunny day, and I know it's not always a sunny day and they're not full of sun lounges, but it is a beautiful, beautiful part of the world. If you're feeling adventurous, you can hop on a boat and get out to St Kilda, which was evacuated back in the 1920s, and it's a very, very moving story. You've got fantastic gardens, somewhere like Tresco in the Scilly Isles. You've got the Jacobite Express steam train, and again, back on the availability that both Sam and Melissa have touched on. There are some things that are more available because at the moment we don't have the international visitors. So, for example, the Isle of Skye, which is extremely popular with overseas visitors. There's loads of availability there now for people from the UK, and it's a fabulous island, and there are excellent experiences and really nice accommodation. There are little distilleries, B&B at a distillery on the Isle of Raasay, which neighbours Skye, for example. But conversely, in some of the areas that are more popular generally with British holidaymakers, like Orkney, Shetland, the Outer Hebrides, Southwest, Cornwall, Devon, we've already got very tight availability there when it comes to May and June next year, because a lot of people have deferred bookings already. And sadly as well, we've lost some of our good accommodation. We seek out places that are a bit off the beaten track and often family run, family owned. And in some cases, small B&B owners have decided that's enough, they're retiring. Other places, some very nice small family run hotels have converted back either to private residences or gone fully over to self-catering. So there's kind of pressure in both ways. There's pressure from the supply side, and there's this pent-up demand. So again, we are doing our best to offer flexibility and encourage people to book in advance, and without that costing too much financial commitment. We're offering £25 down payment on our website holidays at the moment to the end of the year, with a deposit then due by the end of January. And we're offering flexibility for people to change up to 4 weeks before they travel, for any reason. So not just COVID related. And we've done that because we've got very strong relationships with our suppliers, our business partners who we've worked with for many years. So we can do that in a way that is fair to them and fair to the customers.
Good. I think that's absolutely key at the moment. So I've got a couple of questions that I'm just going to ask some very quick answers, because they directly relate to this section. So first one, I'll give you this one, Sam. It's, do you think that having a COVID vaccination will become a condition of travel in the future? And I guess that's in light of the news that is it Qantas have announced that they're going to make that a condition of flying Qantas. So Sam, do you have an opinion on that? Or otherwise I'll go to Melissa, who's nodding, so she has an opinion.
Yeah, I think it's gonna, again, be a bit of a patchwork. I don't think we're going to see a sort of blanket global that's going to be the requirement, but I certainly think for certain destinations it will be. I personally don't think it will become a requirement at a sort of government level coming into the US, but it certainly may well be something that different airlines are putting in place, as we've already seen with the COVID testing protocols that airlines are certainly sort of trialing and putting in place that are independent of what's happening in terms of entry into countries. So I don't think it'll be necessarily mandated at a government level, but I certainly think you might see certain airlines requiring it.
Yeah, and Melissa, you're thinking that in Asia it certainly could be a possibility.
But yeah, I just thought that it could be like the the old yellow fever certificate that you have to have if you've been to places in Africa. That's always been a thing. But yeah, I don't think everyone will. I think it will depend on the country, but I know it's not our destination, but I'm very eager to see my brother who lives in Australia, and you can bet your bottom dollar that Australia and New Zealand will definitely do something like that, because they've been very sort of strict around everything. But I would say it may well sort of replace the PCR test, certainly in the short term. I would imagine as more and more people become vaccinated, then perhaps it will be less of a requirement. But yeah.
Yeah. And Melissa, a question came up while you were talking, which was destinations are opening up in the coming months, but do you expect there still to be some restrictions?
I actually spotted that on one. There were two on there that I thought I was going to try and answer, but yeah, I think it will vary. I was just talking to someone in Oman today, and she said things are very open, but actually you still have to wear a mask in certain places. So I think it would just be things like that, really. And as anyone who's been to sort of Vietnam and places like that before knows, everyone actually has always worn masks there. But yeah, there will be, I would think, certain things that we've now become quite used to. But I think it will differ from destination to destination. But I know that every single country is thinking very carefully about hygiene and safety and those sort of things. So that's being sort of thought about by everybody, really.
Yeah. Okay, good.
And the other one I just wanted to, I noticed on there, someone had commented about the single, the visas that are already being, Thailand have already started doing something with visas. And yeah, that I think where I've been thinking very much about people traveling from the UK, my understanding, and I might be wrong, is that they are issuing visas to people from countries that are deemed low risk. So for example, Australia. I don't exactly know which those countries are, but I don't think the UK are one of them. So yeah, sorry if anybody else is in a low risk country. That is the case, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. Someone else has asked about the EHIC card, and I unless Heather's got a strong opinion on that, I think we'll defer to someone with better European knowledge. I know that's actually. I think it's actually completely unknown. It's one of the many unknowns coming into the Brexit negotiations, which deserves, well, whether the word deserves is right, it's a whole other webinar on its own. So what I'm going to ask you for this time, guys, if you may, is a sort of quick fire answer, because we're coming towards the end of our time, and I do want to get the audience's opinion on this question. So what I guess the question is that the pandemic has shown us it's been really serves as a catalyst so far. It's kind of speeded up existing trends, and obviously we've seen that in things like working from home, in the digitalization of the workplace, and all kinds of things like that. But what trends or operational changes have you seen from travel in your destinations which could point the way forward? Which trends might be really lasting coming through this? And if you could answer quite briefly as a quick fire, I'd be grateful. First question to Sam.
For me, I think there are things that maybe were happening in the background that have been accelerated. The first one is just, I think there's going to be a real sort of drive for people to reconnect. I think everybody's been shut at home. I think we've been increasingly in our sort of tech bubbles. I think there's, we're talking about AR and VR and, can we trust what we read? And I think that's all going to come together as this real want to get back and connect in authentic ways with people. And I think that's going to sort of manifest itself in travel. And then the second, I think that there is finally going to be a sort of real definition and sort of sustainability, I think, is going to start to become a reality. It's obviously been spoken about a lot, and I think it means different things to different people. For me, it means, we've all felt the impact of this. Nobody more than small travel providers, guides, really local operators. And I think we're looking at travel experiences that really support now more than ever local operators, local projects, local communities. And I'd be very interested to hear from people whether that's something that travelers are looking for as well. But I think those two things, so connection and then, that element of sustainability and supporting local communities.
Yeah, okay, excellent. And same question for you, Heather.
I'll come up with one that's maybe a little bit counterintuitive, and that's actually people traveling car free, because whilst at the moment we've obviously seen this rush back to self-drive trips and people being in their own vehicle and their own private space, and I think there will be a resurgence in that longer term as well. But what we saw before the pandemic was a very strong growth in people wanting to leave the car behind and travel by train, and for example, and things actually will be linked together for them and through an organizer, such as ourselves, that could work out the rather complex timetables and how it connected or didn't connect with the ferry and the bus on the other side, or a transfer on the other side to get people to their accommodation. And that was a real growth area. And as expected, it ground to a bit of a halt with the pandemic. But as things have opened up again, I think even we've been a little bit surprised that we have had ongoing interest in that from customers, even now. And back in the autumn, we had not loads, but we did have a handful of people taking the train tours on a self-guided basis. And I think that is something that it will come back, and I think it will come back quite quickly and quite strongly, because it fits in with the idea of slow travel, of being able to relax and really actually experience the country a bit more like local people do as well, because you get to you're traveling alongside local people, and you get to mix, and you really get that in-depth experience of the community and what it's like to live in a place and meet the people there. So
yeah, that very much ties in with what Sam was saying about connection and people needing that kind of human connection. Yeah, excellent. And Melissa?
I think just as Sam was saying, I think certainly we've all had a lot of time to reflect, and I think we've all sort of, maybe our priorities have shifted quite a bit. So I would think people are going to really think about making their travel count, and sustainability is going to become even more important. It's obviously something we care about quite a lot. I do have some sort of not reservations exactly, but although that's being talked about, I do think in the short term, probably not so much for people on this call, but in terms of mass tourism, I do think there will be a bit of a rush to just go anywhere, and people just want to get away, and I think in the short term maybe some people won't be considering that so much, but in the long term I do think we're all going to be thinking much more about why we want to travel and where we want to travel. I also hope that there's going to be more of a sort of move towards slower travel, people sort of thinking about where they're going, and perhaps not rushing around just ticking things off a box, and perhaps sort of as we say, getting under the fabric of the destination rather than just trying to tick sites off a list. And I also hope, and I think that people will perhaps value what we do a little bit more. Certainly more people will value what we do in terms of the extra support that we offer, the financial protection that you get from booking with a tour operator, and the flexibility around the trip, and especially ones like us who can really work with you to get the trip that you really want. So that's kind of it very quickly in a nutshell. But I could sort of talk all day about it, really.
No, I think that's exactly right. It's but and by that you don't mean experienced travel groups specifically. It's
all of us,
travel agents, tour operators, and really talking to specialists and people who can do that. So we hope that's a trend that's that's coming forward. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask some more questions. I'm going to launch another poll. So I've just launched it there, so you should be able to answer. There's a few questions here. So I'll give you a few more seconds to answer, but covers a few of the topics that we've discussed so far on the call. So I've not got any answers coming through yet, but I presume I will do. Oh, they're flying through now. Brilliant. Coming up very good. So first question: what type of travel would you really embrace right now? A lot of all of the above. I like that. That's good. That shows the proper travel audience that we've got here. Good immersion in nature and beautiful sceneries, coming very strong. A bit of an adventure. What type of travel would you want to avoid in 2021? So again, actually, there's nothing particular. People is 50% at the moment, so that's interesting. And what trends in travel will be most important to you? So that authenticity and genuine connections is coming through very strongly there. So those are interesting things. We've had 72% of people voting. So if you haven't voted and you want to do so, you've got about 5 seconds to do, and then I'm going to end the poll, and I will share it afterwards. Okay, so I'll share the results on the screen, so you should be able to see that now. And we'll just move on to a couple more questions, if I may. Let's just see. I've got a question for you here, Sam. Entry into Canada and to and from the USA, how's that looking? Do you know anything about Canada from the UK?
So yeah, our focus is the US, not Canada, but I can say that the US-Canada border, quite incredibly, is still closed, which, given that they're such major partners, is pretty incredible. But there are signs that they're looking at how they would reopen that. My understanding of the UK-Canada border is that, other than certain sort of essential workers and students and things like that, that's still effectively closed as well. Yeah.
Okay. Now, a question for you, Melissa. Melissa is our resident airline geek at ETG. So if in terms of encouraging early booking, how does that work while some airlines have yet to publish timetables?
Well, we usually work on the basis that they tend to stay the same, really. So you can only ever book, it varies from airline to airline, but about 300 days in advance, and that rolls on every day. So if you wanted to go on sort of the 1st of November next year, you could book today, 2nd of November next year tomorrow. So we quite often would book trips, and then we just lock those in as soon as they're available. So that's how we do it. I assume that's what it means.
Yeah, no, I think so. Yeah, exactly. We've got a question here about the Chancellor is saying the economy will be back to normal in the 4th quarter of 2022. What growth do the panelists expect for 2021? Now, that question it strays way too close into politics for my liking. But in terms of travel, where do you see? Do you think do you see some growth in 2021? Do you see a real rebound, Heather?
I mean, I hope we will compared to this year. But the reality is, I mean, at the moment we are planning ahead as though it would be a full-on summer, in, I suppose gambling a little bit almost even on that in terms of bringing the team. We've got the team back virtually full time at the moment, but that's kind of normal for us because it's such a seasonal business. So usually at this time of year we'd be investing, looking ahead to next summer. We're forecasting at the moment to do about 60% in 2021 of what we were originally planning to do in 2020. So that will be significant growth on what we actually did get away in 2020. But I think we're probably still looking 2 to 3 years to get back to where we were January, February 2020.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. Another slightly political question for you here, Sam, but are anti-vaxxers and COVID deniers going to make USA difficult for overseas travellers in 2021?
Oh, I was hoping you weren't going to ask that one, Sam.
I thought you could handle it, Sam.
I mean, I think I've read some interesting sort of reports actually before the news of the vaccine, these trials came out, that was, a lot of this move to herd immunity, which everyone is now relying on a vaccine to get us there. Like, there's always an assumption in those numbers that not everybody's going to take the vaccine anyway, and that the vaccine is not going to be 100% effective. And the models that I was looking at were saying that, they were assuming a vaccine would be 50, 60% effective. And then suddenly these numbers have come out, which are saying it's going to be 90% effective. So I think bottom line is, however it pans out, not everybody out there is going to be vaccinated, but every individual has the power to vaccinate themselves, number one. And I think we've also seen this summer that when, you know, areas get COVID under control, and Heather was mentioning the sort of Highlands and Islands and what a great job they've done, and that they've had minimal COVID numbers anyway, that's a safe environment to travel in, you know, regardless of vaccinations. But, you know, bottom line is we're hoping that as many people as possible get vaccinated. I certainly am. And there's always going to be people that don't feel that's the right thing to do. But
yeah, no,
yeah. I don't think it's going to be a barrier to people traveling in the US.
Yeah, and I guess these things have probably been very amplified by a certain someone who will remain nameless, who's now been voted out of office. So it's very much at the forefront over here because he sucked all the news. And I know there's been a lot more restrictions and social distancing, all the rest of it, than we might have come across in the news in America. Good. Okay, so let's see. We've got someone here saying, can you recommend a destination for a family with teenage children for next summer? So I will give you all a sentence. There you go, a sentence. So where are you recommending for next summer, Heather, for a family?
The Isle of Mull. Not many people know, but you can actually go whale watching off the west coast of Scotland. Have a chance to see minke whales. Probably have a good chance of seeing dolphins as well, and then also eagles, otters, etc. So if you're into wildlife, if your teenagers are into wildlife, then it's a fantastic family destination.
Awesome, great answer, Melissa.
It's hard to pick, but I will say Sri Lanka, because my children will tell you it's the best place in the world because they got really good chocolate pancakes there, which is the thing that stuck in their mind. But with teenagers, they're a bit younger. Sri Lanka, weather's good in the summer, and excellent wildlife, wide variety of different things you can do. And I'll just sneak in Indonesia there as well because great weather in the summer and so many millions of different things you can do there. Sorry.
That's cheeky. And Sam?
I'll go for Wyoming and Montana. So some time in sort of Grand Teton, Yellowstone National Park, and then heading out into the kind of wilds of Montana and some time on a ranch. So fishing, riding, rafting, getting out in the great outdoors. Good.
Okay. And then another quick question for you, Melissa. How safe will private travel be with a driver guide? For those who don't know, in Sri Lanka, particularly India as well, you often have just one driver guide moving you around, and that tends to be the system.
Well, sort of pre-vaccine, I would say it would be very safe. Certainly, like you say, in Sri Lanka, you're with the same chauffeur guide the whole time, and there's lots of protocols going to be in place with cleaning vehicles and all that kind of thing. So I would say it's as safe as anything, really.
But we have a lot of pressure to make sure our drivers are safe as well. So
it's a hot topic in each country. Obviously, they know that's going to be people's number one concern, so it's going to be taken very, very seriously.
And it does in those, that's a bit of an advantage for places like India and Sri Lanka, where you do have one driver guide, because it obviously lessens the contact with different people. But
certainly, also Vietnam, where you perhaps have different guys, they've taken everything very seriously to the point of being completely locked down. So it's going to be very important, and I think it's going to be safe.
We've also got a question which says, the first mention of India, can you expand on when you think it will be safe to travel there, please? So shall I jump in and answer that?
Why not?
So we think that India will open in early 2021. They're obviously well publicized that there has been a lot of cases, although I think that people do need to be very careful with the numbers of cases in India and look at the number of hospitalizations and deaths per 100,000, because India is a very, very big country. When it's safe, I can't say. I'm not, I'm not an epidemiologist, and I know that doesn't stop any of us opining these days, but I can't say. At the moment, you know, it's just not clear. What I would say is there are lots of open spaces and remote areas in India, lots of small hotels. A lot of our holidays, we encourage people to get out and about into places like that. So for me, I would, traveling myself, I would probably at the moment be avoiding the big cities, but if I did travel, I'd do that. And I think that's how travel will come back to India, but it will rely on your individual concept of risk, really. And then there was a great question in there from Catherine Francis, says, do you think that mass tourism has had its day? So I know you touched on this before, Melissa, but briefly, mass tourism had its day?
Probably not, no. I think more people will be interested in the kind of travel that we do, but I don't think mass tourism will go away, because it's not, you know, we have a tendency to think of it just being British people going abroad, but obviously, you know, you've got the whole of China who travel, and Russia and India, and I think there's still travel to some of those countries. It's still a relatively new thing, so I don't think it will go away, but I do think more people will think about where they're going and what it is they want out of the holiday, so I do think there will be a shift.
Yeah, okay. And Sam, you got any thoughts on
yeah, I mean, in terms of numbers, I think no. I think they're gonna, once we sort of recover from COVID, are gonna probably continue to go up, but I do think what this has done is sort of laid bare the kind of, you know, economic skeleton, if you like, of travel, of where the money goes, who's impacted when it stops. And I am seeing the sort of what you might call the mass tourism companies and the big players really starting to talk actually about how they structure the sort of travel experience, the economics of it, how much money is staying with local communities. And I think that's going to be the big change, that, you know, mass tourism, the numbers aren't going to change, but my hope is that we maybe don't talk about mass tourism as a dirty word, and that mass tourism can actually become more of a force for good, and that we can kind of change some of the sort of structures of how it's delivered.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the right kind of tourism. I saw that Key West had voted to keep out the very, very huge cruise ships, because they'd seen such an impact on the cleanliness of their water. Heather, do you think destinations like the Isle of Skye, for example, you mentioned earlier, might come back and try and do things a bit differently in terms of attracting visitor numbers?
I mean, I think it'd be quite important for them to make sure that they are appealing to the UK market, and, you know, but on the whole, the Isle of Skye, I know there was some talk about over tourism there a couple of years ago, and some pictures of minibuses queuing up to get to see one of the fairy pools, one of the scenic attractions. The reality is, you just go virtually around the corner and you'll be somewhere on your own. The Isle of Skye is a very, very big place, and it doesn't actually have that much accommodation either. So the issue more was that there wasn't necessarily the infrastructure for places that have become very popular, particularly through Instagram, etc. So everyone was trying to get to this one particular place to get that particular photo, and there weren't the facilities. There was no car parking. There was no proper organisation around it. So a lot of those things are actually being addressed. I think that was a bit of a wake-up call for some of the areas in Scotland that were seeing an influx of visitors, and again, you know, cruise ships sometimes as well. So there has been quite a lot of investment anyway, and a lot of work on making sure that proper local infrastructures are in place. But I mean, Scotland particularly is a very, very empty country, and it's really not that difficult to get away from it all here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Good. Okay, well, on that note, I think we should pull to an end. We've got some more really good questions, actually, but I think we're going to leave it now. We're actually 10 minutes overrunning, but I am going to leave one last poll with you. If you quickly answer, a bit of fun, but are you more or less likely to travel in 2021 following this webinar? So about the same. overwhelming favourite at the moment, but luckily no one yet saying less likely, because otherwise we might have to pack up and go home. But yeah, the results are in. 28% more likely to travel, 72% less likely, or now it's 70-30. So there we go. I'll end the poll, share the results with you all. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Thank you to our panelists. That was really interesting, and hopefully we'll have you back again in the future. Thank you for attending and for bearing with us when it's supper time, and I'm sure you've all got things to be getting off to. So all the best. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks.
Yeah, and you.